So the freedom of the press is a concept that the United States decided was very important in its foundations. This is what we're going to be talking about from the perspective of several different sources. How many people want to know what it's like to receive freedom from the press, right? No, it can be felt as if we need to be free from the news. So we're going to talk about the nature of what the news does to our hearts. And what it does to our minds is, to be honest, it's in our minds. Now, I am a channel for the soul of God, right? Some people are going to try and take over this message. We're going to talk about the nature of what it means to be a channel versus the guidance that is often felt from a soul perspective. So channel for the soul is not about my opinion about the press or the foundational principles of it. What we're going to be talking about is the nature of that freedom that is often under attack by various news organizations. So if you're a news organization and you're feeling the pressure to retain your viewership, what is it that you do? You lighten up the news, right? Make it feel better. No, where we went was to the dark sort of energy, right? And I want you to think about this very carefully. We have people in this world who deliver messages of hope and inspiration on a daily basis, and they are being received with an amazing amount of love. Okay? However, in their perspective, they're lifting their vibration up to a place of, oh, I just feel so good now. I'm not being bombarded by all the bad news. Except when you're here to do work to change the world. Now, people will say, I'm changing the world by not participating in the news. And so what does that do for me? I don't get informed about the world events. I'm supposed to just look outside and that's my news for today, right? That's very, very few people that do that at this point. What happens if you're a channel and you hear the news before it even comes out? What does that tell you? That tells you what I am it's in reality. So to channel the news before it's even written is one of those things that I'm very good, it's good for me. It lifts me up to an understanding of where my guides can come from. Now, how does this relate to the freedom of the press? The freedom of the press is that for me, I look at several different sources. So I have a freedom of living in a country that sends me so much garbage, right? We're going to talk about that. The garbage news that's being told to so many people, that's fake news. Here's the deal about visionaries of the world. So those who claim that they are of fake news, right? I am fake news when I give it to you straight. I'll give you the straight dope, right? That's another vision for someone else, the straight dope. That was another source of information. The channels of the world know how to do the work that needs to be done. Now, some sources of information are going to be here from souls who have passed on a vibrational, they're a vibrational being that is still invited in. I'm not here to do the work of several souls. I do the work of all. And what that means is I've got access to anybody I need. And that means I have access to those sources of wisdom that are of religion as well. The religious souls aren't going to be watching my show. I don't need to worry about their definitions of what is newsworthy or not. You get your news from wherever you need to. If you're listening to it in church, you are now violating a foundational principle of this country in the United States. You do realize your service is now being challenged for its tax-exempt status. So I don't need to worry about people who listen to news from church. That's many souls. We have to talk about those issues that are affecting us all. So how many people would say, well, I believe the news that comes from higher sources before I believe the TV news or the radio or the internet? And we're going to talk about what the internet did that opened us up to a whole new different way of relating in this world. It opened us up to a bunch of news outlets that we normally wouldn't have had access to due to the constrictions of TV and even radio. So the internet is the best place to get your news, correct? It can be if it's actually, there is nothing like the straight deal from a channel to you. If I say that there is going to be a blowing up of a school, nobody in my family or my friends would actually question me. They would say, dear God, where is it going to happen? I'm not granted that information because of the nature of what it did to my heart to have to hear that come out. This is the nature of psychic prediction, right? Well, let's look at it this way. Do I change the events if I release them ahead of time? No, but I'm going to be here for those souls that actually want to do some work on their own soul and say, let's talk about the freedom of the press then. Is what I'm doing violating the rules of the news, the journalism ethics? How do we get past that? We use these other organizations to bypass those ethics. So there is a freedom to write whatever you want. How do we decipher the news? How do we discern what is best for... We already know. You all read and listen to whatever it is that confirms your own beliefs. There are very few people in this plane that will challenge their viewpoints based on the idea that I know that there is money involved in journalism. Oh my gosh, is there money involved in journalism? We need the source of information that can come through and say that it is also its business. It's also a business. So once news organizations became a business, the nature of corruption automatically comes in. And we don't mean corrupt. There is corruption in several news sources. And we say corruption because the ethics of those, that are in that organization are not, they're abrupt. People are going to say, what? Who's corrupt? Corrupt is different, right? The corrupt news, you could say corrupt. Fake, not so much. Let's challenge that idea of fake news and see where that goes. So it's not about saying that someone's idea of what is truth or not truth, right? Where is that line? If it's all about perspective. I can take any story, spin it, and have it come out to sound better for my side or for whatever, the higher authorities will say, no, you can't do that. You have to give them just the facts. So the spin cycle continues. We're talking about people who are now participating in the freedom of the press. The freedom of the press used to be those souls who had degrees in journalism, who actually understood the ethics behind what they were writing, who actually understood the nature of proper ethics, proper journalism, right? What is proper journalism? There are some people here who would say, I can't rely on any news source anymore because it's so biased in its presentation that it doesn't even make sense to look at it anymore. If all I'm seeing is negative, do I want to watch it? That's where people are. Not really, but a lot of people are in that mindset of I just want to watch the negative that confirms my own political biases. Maybe we would call them biases. So the freedom of the press. This is an episode for many people who are interested in that as a topic, but who would like a different perspective than what they themselves understand it to be. What other perspective could there be other than the freedom to say whatever it is you want? Freedom of the press also means that we get to take other people and hold them accountable for their actions. What if I'm releasing information that is so detrimental to society that it becomes unheard of? Unheard of what people will tune into. So we have so many souls who are putting their focus so far out in left field or right field, so to speak, that it's like the middle majority are scratching their heads trying to figure out, where can I just find the facts without all the political spin? Everything on an episode of most of these shows is political spin. And when you get to the nuts and bolts of society, you start to realize that's the world we're living in. There's a lot more going on in news rather than just politics. So let's talk about that. The ethics behind the news. Who wants to talk about that? What do we call fake news? It's all there, right? There are people trying to do the best they can to not report the things that may support other people's ideas, because if you do that, it then leads others to grab onto that thing, that piece of information, and say, see, we're validated in everything because of this one piece of information. I have a guide who gives me the news before it happens. And sometimes it's beyond your understanding what that means. I am of a soul that has risen above the nature of channeling in some ways. My identity is still within that idea of a channel, but it's also within the idea that most people think that if I get information as an outside source, right? Outside source, that somehow it's of lesser quality. My guides are here to tell you no. Now, my guidance system that I use for the information, I often turn to many sources of information for news. 2 out of the 3 are more liberal, and 1 is more conservative. And 1 I see some validity in, but I also see a lot of things being swept under the carpet. And that's the nature of where we go. As a guide for the majority of the souls that are going to watch me and understand me, they're going to know that how completely unethical it is to say that I have determined that only 1 has swept things under the carpet. I see it on several different sources. I'm not happy with most. So at this point, I'll just listen to my guides as they come through with the news. This is the nature of, it's a freedom of the press. Can I not be a press member because I don't hold a degree in journalism? These are the ethics that were laid down by the journalist of the past. There's no past. There's no present, and there is no future. We are all existing here in this present moment, but it's all there for us. What happens with this is that it becomes one of the most noteworthy episodes ever. How many people want to know what happened 10 years ago that turned me onto this idea that we are all living within this multiverse? Therefore, when you access the other dimensional sources, they have access to those other realms that have already gone through the information that we are about to put forth and know exactly what needs to be released in order to get a certain outcome. Now, the outcome for most people is based on their political or their lives. Let's think about it. So a lot of people just want to know about their own personal soul information, and that's what I'm here to do. It's not a channel, but I am guiding you as a go. It's like people think, oh, she's got a ghost. There's no ghost. We were talking about, people don't look at ghost as, it's energy. We're energy. But we're not going to go down that. I have family members who are atheists, family members who are Catholic, family members who are Mormon, family members who are not practicing any religion, family members that are Christian, and yet I come to a place in time where I start to realize that I'm breaking free from that religious mindset. And it becomes one that is replaced by the political spectrum. We used to sit there and divide ourselves based on religion. Now it's on political party. And I'm going to come through with those issues that can help us determine where we really want to end up 10 or 20 years down the road. And that's our big, big moment. What happens, honey? So most people would say, well, I'm not going to even listen, because how do we determine whether or not she's actually, got the information? Most people go out 10 or 20 years, right? No, she can. She knows where she's at in 10 or 20 years. However, in her present, she's able to bring through information that happens 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes months before it happens. So it hasn't even occurred in the real time of the person that, or people or countries that it has pertained to. And I get it. I also get things as they are playing out in real time in other areas of the country. I haven't branched out to the world because it would be incredibly overwhelming for my system to get that kind of information, because usually what's newsworthy for us here in the United States is something that's more of a traumatic nature for the world, or the vibration of war. So people will say, if you're vibrating at the nature, at that nature, right? The nature, that's Mother Nature. But to be honest, so let's tie this into freedom of the press. I will be a source of newsworthy information. I hold a degree in psychology, not journalism. My ethics have been tested by my guides. I don't release information of a private nature that is to be determined by them. So I could release information about souls she was going to, because there are things that need to be said about certain souls who are having difficulties with their minds. So Brenda was having a struggle with her mindset about information that she releases to other people. It's very, very private. The details are incredibly disturbing for some souls. But it has to be said. And what happens is that as me, I have to realize that because of my nature, I can't be held liable for, any damages for a public persona, right? I can be sued. So what happens when I am on screen and I say, we're not going to reveal any names? The sources will always be of soul. And when people, it's also dimensional beings who come here to help us rise above that idea that we're only working with people or persons that have passed. But that's the nature of what soul is. People think of reincarnation and all kinds of stuff, but we're working with higher dimensional guides. Let's talk about that. Do you think they work at the same level that we do here when it comes to their ideas about who we are and what we're supposed to be doing? I can't help it if people want to sit there and come to me and say, you're not supposed to be releasing that information because it's not right. That's a whistleblower. Right? Oh, this is not going down that path, right? Let's talk about the freedom of the press. Some people will say that's classified information. You broke the law in trying to release something that you weren't supposed to. We then created laws to help protect those souls so that their own vibration, woohoo, yeah, let's violate those laws. They're not violating any laws. They're protected. People are trying to now bring out this idea of let's go after the people who are trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. It may not serve us to say that we support whistleblowers, but in essence, if it is a newsworthy thing, do you think most people want to be put out in public and just, thrown to through the lions, right? We throw them to the lions. For how many millions of people to come at them and say, oh my gosh, look at what you did. You weren't supposed to do that. Now you made my party look bad, right? Or an industry or whatever, because it's really about, holding companies a lot of time. It could be government officials, but a lot of these things are about these companies that are doing bad. And so what are we doing with that? They go to press, and the press says, let's report this. Or they go to the government or to the authorities usually. But some of them go to the press. And then the freedom of the press is being challenged because they say, I have my sources, and people don't believe them anymore. When you come down this road that I've come down, you start to realize that you are working with a guidance system that is so on top of the news that they can't even handle lifting themselves out of that idea that I'm working with news of the day, right? This could be news about parenting. I get news about my kids. I get news about my friends. I get news about celebrities. I get news about, whatever it is that I start to read or see. My life is already being put into place and I see it happening. Okay? So, what does that mean for us? I want this to be a video about the topic. And once you get to the topic, you start to realize that as a channel or a guidance system, which is basically what I am my own guidance. So people are going to assume, well, she's not giving us anything that matters because it just pertains to her. She connected to her soul. Her soul exists in many dimensions and she accesses it. She's in contact with other souls as well because she hears their visions.